Well, hey everyone, I am your host, Gentry, and welcome back to the Vibrant Life Show. This show is all about exploring the purposes God's placed in our lives and the passions He's placed in our hearts to reach the community He's placed us in for such a time as this. So whether we're hearing stories of those living out their passions, helping you discover your purpose, asking hard questions, or leaning into cultural moments, the hope of this show is to remind us that the life that we're called to live is an adventurous one, a meaningful one, a purposeful one. We are invited to live the vibrant life. And today on the show, I'm so excited because my friend Bri Johns is here and we are going to be talking about rest. So many of us in this season are trying to figure out how do we balance our life of work and of family and of friends, but still find rest for our souls so that we can be in this thing for the long run, because I know that God has so much for each one of us. So how do we find health? By really making rest a priority in our lives. And so, Bri, welcome to the show. So glad that you're here.
Me too. Yay.
I love it. So, Bri, you are a pastor, a speaker, a writer, an author. You just have all of the things that are going for you. And I'm so grateful for your voice in my life and in so many people's lives. But God had taken you. I mean, you used to work for Radio Disney.
I did.
You've worked with youth, women, music. You have done all of the things and been in leadership within the church for 20 years?
Yeah.
Girl,
20 years.
You can't be that old.
Here I am.
No way. Yeah, no way. And I just am excited to dive in today into our conversation about rest. This is something that is so, I feel like, a hot topic for a lot of people because they're trying to figure out how we do this. And this category is really something that is close to your heart because it's something that God has really worked you, had to go through it, had to learn it all the way through it. So would you just share a little bit more about what you do and then how that became such a passion in your life to really talk about this and help people in it?
Yeah, I would say it's become a passion out of necessity. And so, doing all the things. I'm a self-professed Enneagram 3, so achiever, right? And I feel like my whole life I've been achieving, getting to the goals of the things that people say you're supposed to do. You go to school and you get a degree and you get married and you have kids, and trying to figure out your purpose in this world and your value and where you're supposed to be and what you're supposed to do and how you're supposed to get back. So rest for me has been something that I kind of suddenly collided with just this past year. I mean, this is me just being open. This past year I quit my job in church ministry, which I'd done for 20 years. Yeah, I had worked as a youth pastor, like you said. I've spoken at conferences. I've done creative arts ministry over worship and teaching and creative and all the things for the weekend, and worked in multi-site, so 6 different campuses simultaneously going at the same time. So lots of church ministry stuff and leadership institutes, mentoring interns that are trying to go into ministry. And then I was having kids at the same time, having babies and being pregnant and going to all-nighters and so many things, having a husband and just trying to find passion inside and outside the church, finding breath for myself and a reason for what my purpose is and all of that. So this last year, I came to this point where I felt like I needed to step away. And it was the biggest wrestle of my life was leaving this ministry job where I was a weekend arts pastor at a large multi-site church, and just feeling like at this point I was just bankrupt, depleted, and spiritually, emotionally, physically was not doing well. I remember being really proud of who I'd become. I had gotten to this point, especially as a woman in ministry, being able to be a teacher and a speaker and to be able to lead teams at that level and to have achieved that much. It felt like that's what I was supposed to do, and yet I felt really empty. I felt really who am I here? And I'm having anxiety attacks because it was never enough. It always felt like I was getting to a point where a new issue or a new idea would come up and I would just be in despair. Like I couldn't handle one more task or one more thing. And then add on to that, raising two little boys and their needs getting bigger and bigger, and opportunities to do speaking at conferences outside of the church. And there was this point where I remember asking Brody, my oldest son, he's now 10, like, hey, do you like that mommy works? Do you like that mommy does all this cool stuff? Because my kids get to be, the hooligans at church. They get to go behind the scenes and like, the snacks and like they're like a PK. And he said yes and no. And I'm like, oh, really? What is that? And so he said, well, yes, because we get to play a lot of video games. And I'm like, I am passed out on the couch when I'm home. Like, I am not present. Wow. I said, okay, what's no? And he said, no, because you don't play with us anymore. And I started to realize, like, what am I going after? when is it going to be enough where I feel like this is, I've arrived, I have my passion and my hopes and my dreams have all lined up and my life is perfectly balanced, and that's just not even a thing. Yeah. I used to mentor lots of college students that were going into ministry full time and tell them, life is like a song. There isn't work-life balance. There's like this, times it will ramp up and there'll be this huge crescendo of your life and it gets really busy and really hard, and then there's times where it lulls. And I found that in ministry, for me, especially, I started to feel this in 2019, that like I was crescendo. And then come 2020, and all of the pandemic stuff and the shutdown, and work got even harder. And I remember asking for sabbaticals and time off, and it's like, well, we are needed right now. And so I was just hustling and trying to keep everybody going. And in the midst of that, I had team members who were really struggling and tired. And so we were tired and we were churning. And I just finally hit a wall and had to have some crucial conversations with leadership above me that like, I need to step away. And I don't know where I'm going. It's almost like Abraham, where Abraham was like called to go to a land that he doesn't even know yet. Yeah. Like your blessing is somewhere out there. And so like, I don't know where I'm going. I have no joy in my heart anymore. And I feel like I can't even hear God's leading anymore. Like I've become so self-sufficient and I've run myself so ragged that God is silent. And I'm craving, kind of going back to just simpler times. Just simpler times is all I wanted. And so rest was kind of a big word for me these past couple years, to find a point to figure out, I guess, like getting back to the basics. And what I've learned this past year, and I haven't stopped working, obviously still need to make an income, but I did more freelance speaking and writing that was a little bit more manageable with being a mom, is that rest is probably the hardest work you'll ever do, like choosing rest. And
why is that?
Because it goes against every part of who you have been maybe shaped to be, right? Rest is it's connected to our trust in God. And so trusting God means letting it all go. And it means not holding anything with, tight fists, and it's waiting and it's uncomfortable. And I mean, I just was at the San Diego Zoo this weekend with my kids, and a former coworker at the church I was at texted me and asked, she texted me on accident, and she's like, oh, the report's coming, blah, blah, blah. And I was like, oh, I think you got the wrong person. And she's like, oh, hey, how are you? And where are you working now? And in my heart, I was like, I felt like my heart like racing of like, I need to prove to her that I have this title and I'm doing really well. And there's some identity attached to work. And there is some confusion around rest, whether that's looking lazy or looking not productive or not important, and maybe that's just all me. Maybe that's my Enneagram 3 just like torturing me. But I think that there are a lot of people that are struggling with who they are becoming and what that looks like from the outside. Like, can you just care less what other people think and actually settle your identity on who God says you are and where He's leading you, which just feels like a free fall.
Yes. And I want to take a moment here when she keeps talking about the Enneagram, just in case you don't know what the Enneagram is. It is a personality test, and I would love to do a show on that sometime, because I think we would have a fun one talking about the three.
Oh my goodness.
There's 9 of them. Just as it's just a timeout because you have mentioned it, and it is achiever, and that's kind of your personality. So you're already wired this way to go to the next, to go to the next. And that's, I mean, when I'm listing off all the things you do, it's like speaker, you know, like boom, 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 boom. And how often we, like, rest is hard work because we have to separate ourselves from the labels that we put on ourselves to have to produce all of the time.
All the time.
And I think we live in a society, or what do you think, I guess, too, and you can add on to this, that we live in a culture that only promotes that type of living. So when you're trying to go against it, it feels even harder. Have you experienced that?
It feels harder. It feels lonelier. Like your community changes quite a bit. There's also a lot of freedom in it though. And there's a lot of peace in there. Somebody told me recently when I was just struggling with like, what should I be doing right now? Even though I'm resting, like I need to do something, you know, that's fulfilling, that's filling my heart, my cup up. And she had told me, well, I think the soil just needs to rest. And I always think about that of like, you know, if we're called to produce good fruit in this world, but we're constantly sowing and reaping and sowing and, you know, harvesting and tilling, and this land becomes very depleted. There's no good things coming from it because the land is dry. The land is just, you know, desperate and desolate.
Right.
And so I really thought, you know, yeah, there's a struggle as far as like, okay, where do I fit? Where do I fit now? And actually, it's funny because as I've gone on this journey, I've met so many more people like me. They're kind of nomadic in that they're trying to figure out how to rest and connect with God and do their purpose in ways that are less hustle centric, I guess, which is really a big thing. I like the hustle culture. I like being able to grind and do things all the time and, you know, fast paced. I love all that. But it comes at a huge cost when you never take time to tend to your soil.
Right. And that's biblical.
Yeah.
That soil where the land will get its rest. I mean, that's a promise in scripture. And when we look at that, and it's talking about Sabbath, it's talking about resting,
right,
where the land will rest the 7th year, and then it'll be the 49th and the 50th year, the year of Jubilee. The land had to rest, and they had to really trust that God would provide for them.
Right.
They worked harder in the 6th year, or 6th day, if you look at it in weeks, so that they could take the 7th day off and totally rest. And I do believe let's go back to identity, and how that keeps us from experiencing rest, and some ways that I think that people, like maybe pain points along the way, that people experience some things that you've experienced when you're like, okay, my identity, like this is so hard. Have you seen other people do that? Talk about how identity is tied into that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Identity is hard because identity is always attached to where I feel like I belong, where my community is, who I am, and how I exist in this world. And so when we've grown up to your identity is attached to what college you went to, and what high school you went to, what team you were a part of, and what teams you've worked on, and what projects you've been a part of. And you can be really proud of that. It starts when you're really little too, little trophies and little rewards and awards for being an achiever and for being a part of a group that won. Mm-hmm. And so I think that that's really hard to unlearn, especially in this day and age where there's a lot of still rewards attached to hustling. There's salaries, there's promotions, there's friendships, there's connections, there's networking, there's so much that can be done. And so identity, when you strip all of that away and it's just you and God, like if you take everything off the table and it's just you and God, what is left? Mm-hmm. You know, who is left? Are you a shell of a human? Are you still completely content with who you are and what your days looks like and your day's purpose looks like, and how you show up every single day? It just looks different. Yeah. And yeah, it's really, I would say identity is really tricky because it has a lot to do with just relationally where you're connected, and also how you value who you are and who other people are. I mean, it's the same thing like when you meet somebody new and it's like, oh, hi, Allie, nice to meet you. What do you do?
Right.
I mean, when you're in a place of, oh, I don't have a title, I'm not at a specific company, the answer to that question is a little complex. And I feel like sometimes I like overshare. Like, well, I just, quit my job because I'm so burnt out and all that.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
it's like, oh my gosh, I just threw up on that person.
This is a problem of my life.
And it's an identity crisis in some ways, right?
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah,
I think that's where identity can get a little tricky, and that having to really evaluate, okay, who am I really and whose am I really? And especially with the things that we attach ourselves to for identity that could be taken away or could change at any minute.
Right.
You may place yourself in a situation or a relationship or a job that gives you a sense of identity, and then it's taken away or it leaves, and you are just distraught. And you're in a whirlwind of like, who am I? And so I think that it's really important that we consistently rest to center ourselves on who we really are.
Right.
Not on the other 6 days of what we're trying to become. And so I find that like in this last year, I've gone on a lot of walks and like asking God for a word. Give me a word for the year. Give me a word what I can focus on, what I can do. And I kept hearing him say, and it was so frustrating, just be.
Oh.
I was like, just become?
Yeah. Just belong.
Where I belong, become.
Belong. Where I go? What do you want me to do?
Just be. And I'm like, I don't know how to do this. It's really hard, and there's no map for it.
Yeah.
There's no one that's able to share really this path. And so it's a inner searching, and it actually strips away everything that you depend on so that you can depend on God.
Right. Amen. When you were saying the human, like, remember, and I hear this all the time, we're not human doings, we're human beings.
Mm-hmm.
And when we come back to identity and who we're serving, first and foremost, why are we doing this? If we're believers, then we have to look to God first, and then remind ourselves who we are because of who he is. And then out of the overflow, we get to go serve. Exactly. And we get to go and do, because it's so often that we go straight to, oh yeah, I do this, and that. And, there's an identity piece. I mean, sometimes people come up to me and just ask like, hey, what's the next trip you're going on? This is probably my first question I get from a lot of people. And I love it because I love traveling. So it doesn't really bother me, but I don't have a husband or kids. So they're like not asking, how's the fam, So they're like, where's your next trip? And it's a part of how people know me, right? But when I don't have a trip coming up, I'm like trying to explain why I don't have a trip coming up. Because I'm like, whoa, my identity is slightly wrapped up in that. It is something I do and what people know me for, and that's fine. But to be careful of even something like that, which is a hobby, an extra thing that we don't get so wrapped up in. This is how people have to know me. So I have to perpetuate. I have to keep going and doing so that I keep up with what people are thinking I should be doing, or they're probably not even thinking about you, honestly.
But that's the danger of like this era of social media where you're branding yourself, right? And like everybody has a brand of who they are, like the things that they like and the things that they do, and those aren't bad at all. Like those are, we are supposed to be unique and not like anyone else. So we're not supposed to be bums and sitting around not doing anything, waiting for God to give us a sign. I think there's so much action that can be done in loving God and loving others. But it's to a point where we need to constantly stay rested on him and not look for that in achievement. So yeah, that's hard. Achievement or titles. That's the thing that you'll see on every social media platform is you got to put like your tagline of who you are and what you're about, right?
Yeah.
And so does that need to define you? Does that define you? Is that partly who you are, but there's something deeper? And yeah, being able to recenter and find some good health around who you are, some health around just the physical, spiritual, emotional person that you are.
Right. And I love that you were mentioning, okay, so you've mentioned the pain point, you've mentioned your story, and some of the things that you do, because I know that there's some people, we have schedules. It's common for us to say, how are you doing? Well, I'm just so busy. Yeah. I like to say my life is really full. It might have a full life. That's what I try to say. But I think normalizing, stopping, resting is something that we have to fight against culture. Like this is actually if we take a stand, actually, I think this could be an opportunity for the church to look different than the ever-moving hamster wheel of the world, that we look different because we prioritize rest. But that can look so different for different people. So what are some practical tips if people are like, I am so tired, I'm heading towards burnout, I can't just quit my job, but I do need to change something. What are some practical ways that they can do that?
Right. Don't just quit life altogether. Don't quit your job. Don't do that. For me, it was really at a point where physically I wasn't well. Like I could not show up for my teams. And I think it's about practicing saying no more than that's comfortable, which is hard.
That is so hard.
Because we can live in this scarcity mentality, the scarcity mindset that we're never going to get the opportunity again if we say no. And so again, it goes back to your trust in God. It's saying no when you feel like in your heart, like I am exhausted even thinking about that opportunity. It's again, not looking to others for your identity, not looking to your boss to constantly praise you. And when that's lacking, now you're hustling even more to be noticed. And it's not looking for, it's not being a servant in your home to the people. It's being a partner and a mother or a father, a person who has purpose in the home, but not to become this martyr in your home either. Yeah. So it's being able to take time to understand that, okay, rest is really important. My health is really important. Saying no is really important, even though it's uncomfortable and it's unpopular. And again, letting the soil rest so that you can actually grow good fruit. And I think, like, when you think about having a soil that is dry and it's depleted, that means that your friendships are depleted, your friendships aren't good and they're not growing, your health is not good, it's not growing, your family's not good, it's not growing. Those are those things, those signs to be able to see that, like, okay, soil needs to rest, I need to come back to just me and God at this point, spend some time in the Word. I really love Psalm 37:3. It's been something on my heart for years now as an achiever, but dwell in the land and cultivate faithfulness.
Wow.
Like dwelling in the land just means to wait, and to cultivate, to grow in your faithfulness is such a hard act because it's not tangible. There aren't like steps to do it, but I love that as, it has a lot to do with trusting in God. And that's the verse before us, trust in the Lord and do good and dwell in the land and cultivate faithfulness and commit your ways to Him. And, He's going to show you His plans. Right. And so being able to sit, so there aren't like practical, tangible things, and it's not about giving up and quitting everything, which I think if people take that away from my story, then that's not what I'm trying to portray, because I still really am active in doing ministry and things. It just looks differently, and I don't have the title and I don't have the salary, and it just looks different. But I feel more released to do what God created me to do more than ever. And I feel a lot more content and at peace because I'm focusing on all parts of my health.
Right. Which is the temple. Like, right. We are the new temple. And in the New Testament, we are the temple of the Holy Spirit. So we have to prioritize our health. And I'm speaking to myself right now as I'm going through so much, and really because of lack of rest in my life. So you're like really preaching to me right now. And because they're like, you got to take time off, girl. I'm like, I can't. Like, what are you talking about?
Right.
And I felt like that and feeling like I can't do it. And so what you're saying is really helping me, honestly, in this moment. And it's such a reminder of how critical this is.
And there are going to be times you cannot stop. Like, I have so much going on, I cannot stop. But you also can reframe. Okay, why? What's my motive for doing this? And being able, again, to really, really dive into, okay, why am I doing this? How am I doing this? Can I do this from the overflow of some of the good things in my life? Do I need to say no to some other things like going out, social, hanging outs, and things like that if you've got a lot of work and things to do? Yeah, it's hard. But again, centering your identity, sometimes it's just a mindset, and it's not just quitting all the things.
Right. It's even just how your days are scheduled.
Exactly.
I mean, you can just maneuver. I have you experienced God giving you back time as you decided to rest?
Yes.
Do you know what I mean by that? Where it's like all of a sudden you were able to get everything done and you were resting.
Yes. A good boundary too that I found, I had a college professor share with me, is that never do ministry more than 2/3 of your day. So if you're in ministry, if you're working, if you've got a lot, try and consider you need at least a third of your day to work on yourself or to do something that fills you up, whether that's cooking or reading or going for a run. So if you're doing something in the morning and the afternoon, make sure your night is free. If you're doing something in the morning and the evening, make sure your afternoon is free. Trying to find some space to get a breath.
That is so good and will help us. Truly, the heart of this show is to help people live a vibrant life. And without rest, you cannot do that.
Right.
You can't live in everything that God has for us. Bri, you are just a wealth of wisdom. I'm so glad that you were here today. How can people connect with you?
They can find me on my website, so brijohns.com, BriJohns.
She forgot her last name.
Or on Instagram, so yeah, like _Bri Johns. And yeah, I'd love to connect with people and cheer them on as they're trying to figure out the thing. And again, I'm not an expert at this. I'm just living this. And so thanks for letting me share where I'm at right now.
Of course. I'm so honored to be here.
Thank you for joining me on the Vibrant Life Show. I would love to connect with you and get to know you. My favorite place to hang out is over on Instagram at ali.gentry or over on Facebook. You can also go to my website, aligentry.com. That's ALIGENTRY.com. Sign up for my newsletter to stay up to date and get links to the show on all platforms after we air, the show's YouTube channel, and really just all the things. I am so honored to get to hang out with you today. My heart is that you remember that each day is an invitation to live the vibrant life.